sorry, just to let you know this is being recorded. Sorry, I should have done that beforehand. So you will have an opportunity to ask questions of the speakers. Please put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. If you hover your mouse over the bottom of your screen, you'll see the Q&A box. And at the end, we'll be recommending some suggested training you might want to consider based on today's conversation. And so without any further ado, I'm going to introduce our two speakers today and hand over to them. So we have Claire Gravil, who is Head of Finance, Direct Commissioning, NHS England and NHS Improvement, North East and Yorkshire region. I've known Claire for very many years through CIPFA Council and regional activities. And Devasuda Anblagan, who likes to be known as Dev, Senior Finance Manager, NHS England and NHS Improvement East of England. And I know Dev from when she was a student at CETC in Mansell Street. So without further ado, I will hand over to Claire to start the session, starting with a brief introduction from both Claire and Dev about themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, and hello to everybody. I'm a little bit hoarse today. I might as well let everyone know on here that at the moment I'm recovering from COVID. So my screen's gone blank, so I'm hoping everyone can still hear and see me. Alison, just give me the nod if not. So I'm Claire Gravil, actually Claire Durant. I haven't got around to changing my name yet. I was recently married, but Claire Gravil will be fine for today. So yes, I'm in NHS England Improvement, and my current role is Head of Finance for the COVID vaccination programme. I took on that role October 2020, when obviously everything was starting with COVID, and genuinely have absolutely loved it. So yes, that's my current role, Head of Finance COVID vaccination programme. But prior to that, my substantive role is within something called specialised commissioning, which some colleagues may have heard of, may not have heard of, and that's the high cost, low volume type activity we do in the NHS, and obviously public health as well. So that's just a little bit about me. So I will just ask Dev if she wants to also say hi and just introduce yourself, Dev.
Hi, my name is Dev. I am a Senior Finance Manager within East of England, NHS England and Improvement. So like Claire, I am responsible for the direct commissioning finance, so mostly public health as well as part primary care. I've joined NHS England and Improvement in the last 2 years. So recently promoted, as in the last year I've been in this new role through my promotion. I've been in the NHS since September 2017, but we'll talk about it a bit more as we're going.
Thanks, Dev. Kind of nicely segues me. So do you want to just maybe talk about how you got into the NHS? How was your career from, I don't know, university days to here? How did you get to where you are now, and what brought you into the NHS?
So I joined the NHS because I'm passionate about improving the health and quality of life of the patient I serve. Previous to my finance role, I was an MRI physicist researching perinatal development and the aging brain. And during my academic career, I saw the need to improve resource allocation models in the NHS and the medical research by forecasting future healthcare pressures and taking action to address them now. So this motivated me to join the NHS Finance Management Training Scheme in September 2017, so that I could better understand the current challenges and the future demands, and therefore influence the strategy development and implementation and the interlinked funding allocation in the medical research and the NHS ultimately. So that's how I've kind of moved from academia to the NHS. I can talk a bit about my NHS finance career, I suppose. So within the NHS Graduate Management Training Scheme, I've had the opportunity to work on different placements. And the 3 different NHS organisations that I worked at was Cambridge University Hospital, which is a big acute teaching hospital, and then a Hertfordshire Community NHS Trust, as well as a system delivery unit of Cambridge and Peterborough SDP. And I also had the opportunity to work with a consulting firm, basically PwC, where I had the privilege to work on projects in an ambulance service as well as an acute trust. In completion of my training scheme, about March 2020, right before the pandemic kind of took its big, bang. I then joined the East of England, NHS England, and Improvement as a finance manager before being promoted to my current role, I suppose. So I've undertaken various placements in these organizations that I've mentioned. So including financial management, financial accounts, income, PMO and transformation, procurement, payrolls, accounts receivables and payables. So basically the whole of finance to some extent, just to give me experience to help me connect different areas of finance together. But it also helps me understand the development and implementation of plans, strategies and control in various NHS organizations, which is based on the long-term needs of the local population to improve the care in the areas we serve. I've also been, good, I suppose I gained experience in the integrated care systems. In the future, it's going to be integrated care boards. And I gained insight in partnership between the NHS, local authorities and other organizations who take collective responsibility for managing resources, delivering services based on NHS standards and improving the health of the local population. So that's kind of set me to my current role, where at the moment, obviously, I'm responsible for looking after the public health and primary care funding for the East of England region. And I look at business planning, development and financial performance management for the region's budget, probably around 400 million or so. I lead month ends, ensure the systems and processes are in place to enable accurate financial reporting as well, control and monitoring. And I ensure funding requests undergo proper assurance so that the services commissioned by the service provide best value for money. So I think that's kind of summarized a bit of my work, Claire, but I know that you have similar kind of experience as well. So do you want to share yours? Be interesting.
I will. Particularly Coughlan to start. So now, similar to you, I went to university a little bit perplexed is probably the right word. I wasn't quite sure where I was going to go when I went to university, and I did a chemistry degree at university because my A levels were all very science-based, and I opted for chemistry and did really well in my chemistry degree. So I thought I was on a path with chemistry, and I actually worked on a chemical plant as an engineer for a couple of years over in Anglesey, which was strange, but it was really interesting. But after a couple of years of that, I thought, this doesn't feel quite right for me. And because of the degree I'd done, and obviously the chemistry degree, the mathematical background, and all the just transferable skills, actually, it meant I could apply for quite a few roles. And I don't know what it is about the NHS, but I've loved the whole medical world, the whole NHS. You could say even back to the day, and people might laugh on this webinar, of watching like Casualty growing up and things like that on TV. I had this internal desire to be part of something like that. And I just happened to apply for the NHS graduate scheme while I was doing the chemical job. And I was successful. It was hard to get through, don't get me wrong, it was hard, assessment centres and things, but actually it was a brilliant scheme and I got in there that way. And I think we'll come on to the grad scheme in a minute, but I double run to the grad scheme with doing the projects and working in places. But after the grad scheme, my first role was in a hospital. Absolutely loved it. It felt so front end, and I was in there, and my office downstairs was like next to all of like the diagnostics and things. So you're part of something. It was really exciting, actually. So when you're doing these business cases to develop funding for something, well, you can just walk down the corridor and actually see it implemented. And I remember once a surgeon was trying to get funding. I can't remember the exact procedure and the exact kit, but basically they wanted this kit to improve something in theatre. And I actually said, no, it's not financially viable. It doesn't add value for money, And they said, well, come to theatre. Come and see how this would improve theatre time, theatre efficiency, but also the impact for the patient. So in I go into theatre. And that was the thing about in an accountant in the NHS is you've got that aspect of the role. You can actually be part of that. And that was fascinating. So by going into theatre, seeing exactly what this surgeon was requesting, helped me understand the business case. So it wasn't necessarily just about that round bottom figure. Obviously, we have to justify the finances. We have to make sure everything's governed, value for money, and we cover all that off. But actually, there was other elements to that decision-making process, which as a young accountant really impacted on me to make me realise it's not just about the money, it's about the wider concept. So no, I love my time in a provider, but I actually took a break from the NHS for a couple of years. I went into local government just to get a feel of how public sector works. So I went and did a couple of years in local government. And again, I really enjoyed that. It was very different way of the finances working. But actually, when it comes to your training, it wasn't, because it's the same concepts, the financial principles, everything was the same, but actually really interesting. But my current role, I came back into NHS England as assistant head of finance back in 2013, actually in primary care finance. But the role's just migrated. So I've done primary care finance, specialised commissioning, worked my way up to head of finance for specialised commissioning and public health, but like yourself, Dev. And like I say, at the moment now doing the COVID vaccination programme. And just the insight and all the different roles. So I've done provider, commissioner, national, local. And I think to colleagues on the call, there's so many opportunities out there. You don't just end up in one place. It feels like there's different strands to different things. Obviously, your accountancy training sets you up for what you do, but actually the world's your oyster. So for me, that's how I got to where I am. So no, didn't do an accountancy qualification to start with, like I say, chemistry degree and then CIPFA. So yes, Dev, that's where I am, and that's where I go. So I guess that segmented, doesn't it, into the graduate management training scheme a little bit, Dev? You still there?
Yeah, I mean, yes. It sounds like both of us are, we started off from science and then obviously moved into the grad scheme and so on. So it's been, quite similar journey in some way. You there, Claire?
I think Claire might be having some connection problems. So while we wait a couple of seconds for her to come back. Are you back, Claire? You're back in the room?
I'm back in the room. I don't know where you left me at that point, but I was just about to hand over to Dev about the graduate management training scheme.
Yeah, so we can talk a bit about the graduate management scheme. Basically, so as part of the training, obviously, I said I worked on different placements. But more interestingly, because I've already talked about the finance part of the journey, I thought it'd be quite nice to talk you through some of the orientation that we had. So the orientation was really quite important, especially for me, because I thought it was really important to understand how different functions operated and collaborated within NHS. So how does finance talk to HR, and how does HR then talk to the clinicians, the workforce and so on. So it's all very kind of interrelated. So this really helped me to understand the vision, the values, the priorities, as well as the strategies of the organizations that I worked at. So all the 3 organizations I worked into, I had the privilege to do that and understand how different clinical and non-clinical departments collaborated to achieve the organization's vision. I also gained insight into their working relationship with the finance department. Obviously, we're setting the budget, and what does that mean for the organization? So it's really crucial. So I spent time following, kind of shadowing people, clinicians, non-clinician in different departments and functions, such as pottering. So I walked around with the porters the whole day. We did probably around 20,000 steps all around, up and down the hospital, delivering blood samples, collecting medicine, moving dead bodies in some way. It was all quite interesting, I have to say, but really understand what does the frontliner do. I had the opportunity to work with volunteering services, so provided food to patients in the hospitals. Spent some time in the ambulance, really, going to the highways and where accidents took place, and older, all care homes and so on, where they had emergency, or people who, elderly patients who lived by themselves at home. And what does the paramedics do? They don't just go in there and help them medically, but they wash up their plates and clean up your house. Rather eye-opening for me, because you don't really see that other humane side, you kind of look at it and go, oh, this is the medical and that's what the cost is for. So it's really interesting. So yeah, the other places, I suppose, I'll just give you a bit of a rundown. So oncology department, spend some time in hospice. So how does the care move from hospital to palliative care, to hospice, end of life care? And what does that mean to both NHS as well as charities? Health and Wellbeing department, homeless shelter, a geriatric medicine ward. What does that mean of discharging a patient, and after that, what happens? And of course, like yourself, I went into theatre and emergency department, and in the theatre, I had a hip replacement operation. Just watching that, and I've always, I've wanted before finance, I suppose. Glad I'm doing finance though, because I don't think I can do this bloody kind of drilling and so on construction work into people's anatomy. But yeah, those were really, really useful, very helpful for my kind of career, the orientation part. I know, Claire, you did something similar as well. Do you want to touch on that as well?
I did, and apologies, I don't know what happened to my iPad there, so I don't know where you lost me. I probably had this really cool static image before I went off. So back in the day, back in 2000, when I was on the scheme, it was called the Cook's Tour. And to this day, I don't know why it was called the Cook's Tour. So I did something very similar. I remember doing a night shift in Burnley A&E, and it was in the troubled times of the riots around Burnley and Bradford, and it was a really interesting time. And I think, like you say, some of this is extremely exciting. And I suppose colleagues on the call might think, well, what's this got to do with my career? What's this got to do with finance? Well, actually, I think it's really important that moving into a career of finance or moving into the NHS, it's understanding how it all works, how it all functions. So actually you can do your job well, and you have empathy and you have compassion and you have understanding to everybody and anybody you work with in the NHS. I always said, the NHS only functions, it's not just doctors and nurses, it functions from accountants, porters, caterers, cleaners, taxi drivers, and I think you've got to have have a personality that appreciates that. And that's why the graduate scheme, and that's why even now in my role, I always say, if I don't understand something, I'll go and see the process, walk the floor, they always say, walk the pathway, and that's stuck with me. So even now when we're having to do business cases or make decisions, I'll put myself out there. I'll go and meet the clinicians. I'll go and meet the end users. I'll talk to patients, and I suppose that's been inherent from the scheme, Dev, because that's what we learned, and that's how we came about it. So no, the grad scheme was great. Don't get me wrong, it was hard work, because at the same time as working, you're doing the CIPFA qualification and you're training to be an accountant in that period at the same time. So you've got to be able to multitask, but you've also got to be able to kind of, like say, work, study, and all that kind of stuff. So it's hard, but it's extremely rewarding. And like I say, we both did CIPFA. I think at the time it was a part of the graduate programme, wasn't it? We did CIPFA. I joined the scheme, and again, to colleagues online, when I started the scheme, I'd heard of accountancy institutes, but I'll be honest, I hadn't heard of CIPFA. So when my line manager said, oh, we've enrolled you for CIPFA, we didn't have Google, maybe Google was just starting in 2000, but I was like, what's CIPFA? So actually I had to do research on what it was, but actually on hindsight, it's one of the best things the graduate training scheme did for me. I flourished through CIPFA. I loved the modules, I loved the structure to it, I loved how it was delivered. I was saying I went through to Liverpool for block training. I know it's all very different now, but I absolutely loved it. I loved the access to different people within CIPFA. I love the fact you were a person, not necessarily just a number. I won't lie, it was difficult. When I did CIPFA, we had something called the P3 project, and I know that's disappeared now, which was like at the end, it's like a dissertation, and it had to be based on a real life piece of work you were doing at work. So actually it was very relevant and very real. And again, for me, that was one of the unique parts of my training, because actually I have still got the thesis now. It was a cost evaluation, can you believe, of the catering department at the hospital I was working in, about whether we should outsource our sandwich business. But you laugh at it now, but actually it was relevant at the time. And we then had to submit that and then go for a Viva. The whole fact, I know you've done a PhD, haven't you, Deb? But you know, when you do a Viva in front of, so it was actually directors of finance we went to, and we had to sit in front of this panel and present our dissertation, question and answers, and it could have been about everything. It was daunting, but actually the amount of skills you think about that, it's like interview skills, being able to answer technical questions, being able to communicate, was part of the training, and so it was great and stood me in good stead. So that's what I got from the training scheme, and that's what I've got from CIPFA, and it will always live with me. I don't know about yourself, Dev. Have you got any anecdotes you might want to share?
Yeah, so with CIPFA, obviously, it gave me a good understanding of public sector accounting and how different public sector bodies work together. So NHS, local government, central government, and charities. You don't think charities are important, but it's actually part of the whole accounting of the public sector. So how do they work together, and what does that mean? It was really helpful. The knowledge I gained from CIPFA training has been extremely valuable for the work that I do, both in financial management, reporting, as well as strategy. And more recently, I suppose, I still refer to my lecture notes from CIPFA strategy modules alongside the Green Book. So the Green Book obviously is the Bible for capital business cases for hospital. So I look at those, the 5 case model stuff, and I suppose anyone in this call here, when you do CIPFA, you'd learn that. It's really important to note that it's not just about the theory, it's how you can apply, and that's been very beneficial. And the other stuff I would say is, it's important to note that it opens the career door to both in the public as well as private sector, because the moment you kind of hear CIPFA, you go, oh, it's a public sector accounting body, and that's it, that's all I can do. But really the big fours, I've had conversation with some partners and directors in the big four, and they've kind of offered me roles there. Not that I'm going to leave, I still am very much an NHS valued person, so I'm kind of sticking here. But it just shows that it opens up door to both the public sector accounting kind of side, because they're really keen to kind of the consultancy side of things of the big four. They really want to support the healthcare and the public sector consultancy. Mm-hmm. So that's just important to note. And like yourself, Claire, you mentioned you had this kind of thesis to do. So obviously, at the moment, we don't really do that part of the portfolio. But one thing the NHS Graduate Management Training Scheme gave me was we were asked to take the Elizabeth Garrett Anderson program, which is the healthcare postgraduate certificate, alongside CIPFA. And these modules are face-to-face sessions, and they also have online kind of readings and so on. And it really provided me opportunities to understand my personality, how to be a better healthcare leader. So really knowing myself so I can, better interact, work and influence others while adapting to the new environment and developing resilience, that, you kind of forget about the softer skills. So NHS Grad Scheme kind of brought that just alongside CIPFA to kind of really embed those kind of key values. And this sessions really encouraged me to reflect on my values, the different areas of governance in my working environment. So I would say they both go hand in hand, and it's been really beneficial. So like yourself, I've really enjoyed my journey in the studying part, but it's hard work, I have to say.
I don't know about you, Dev, but I'll just reflect as well. When I started, I had a buddy and eventually a mentor as well through the grad scheme, and that was really beneficial because it was helpful, because I think the mentor at the time was a senior person, I think director of finance, so it's always helpful. So again, I know you can get that, I think, through CIPFA. This is where you might need to help me out because you're closer to it at the moment, because through the apprenticeship type scheme, don't you, Deb? You can get mentors and coaches and things that way. I got my initial career mentoring and buddying from the grad scheme, but for colleagues on the call, it really benefited me having someone who I didn't necessarily know to help me through that mentor type ship, to kind of give me a little bit of guidance, give me a little bit of constructive feedback and support, on some of those steps through your career and steps through the next stages and things. So I would definitely advise anybody who's thinking about it, whether it be a coach, a mentor or anything, take that opportunity when you get it, or look for that opportunity or ask for that opportunity. Because like I say, it benefited me, and it still does to this day. I still have a mentor, still have a coach. Doesn't matter how old or how career old I am, it still helps to have that person. So yeah, so again, that's where I found that helpful. Got a tickly cough. So Dev, the next thing I was thinking about, some people on the call might be wondering, we talked, didn't we, about what transferable skills we think we both use on a daily basis that actually we might be able to use either as a public sector accountant or wherever the career might take us. Do you want to maybe start that one off, and I'll chip in about where we think we've got transferable skills for our careers?
Yes, of course. So for me, I suppose I've got the research and analytical skills. So like yourself, science background, physics, so mathematical kind of ability. And that's why I really enjoy doing stuff. And that helps me with critical thinking. And what does that mean? You look at number, it's just not number. It's actually understanding how does that link to the clinical and non-clinical kind of functions, solving complex problem, and coming up with the right decision, and collaborating with different people. So, the clinicians and non-clinicians, so that we get the best value for money for the NHS as a whole, because it's not our money, it's the taxpayers' money, but it's actually working on that kind of value in the lines. I obviously come from a computational background, but I still use a lot of spreadsheet and kind of analytical tools to make sure some of the work that we do is automated. Project management and time management is really important. The more senior you become, the more you're likely to be given projects, and you have to kind of stick with deadlines. And how do you organize yourself? How do you delegate work to your trusted member of staff? Understanding who's got what skills, and how do you bring that team together? So that's really quite important. So it's not just the organizational skill, but being a team player, being a leader, making sure everyone is motivated and work together to kind of achieve those targets. And some of the skills you learn from CIPFA, you've got the ethics that we strongly stick by, and then also we have the Elizabeth Garrett Anderson side of things that enabled me to kind of build up the softer skills. Other side of things, I'll say NHS is fluid. We didn't know the pandemic was coming. I had to kind of deal with some COVID stuff, just like Claire. And of course, the funding, the planning and stuff that we work on is all up in the air. We don't know what that means in the next coming year or so on. So it's really important to be adaptable and flexible with the work that we do. And how do we communicate with people and influence people in the right way, both orally as well as written, verbally and written as well, making sure we're not pleasing everyone, but everyone works and understands the priority, so that we work together as a team. The networking, the collaboration, the negotiation and influencing. I think those are the main skills that I would say I kind of work in my current role. And it's, kind of build up from the grad scheme as well. What about you, Claire?
No, I totally agree. I think, like you say, people can get quite vexed and fixed on the technical accounting skills, which, don't get me wrong, are critical, being an accountant. Got to be able to, like I was saying earlier, you've got to be able to communicate, listen. Big part of the job is to listen and understand. Obviously, I'm a team leader at the moment, and it's about understanding your team. I always say you get the best out of your team if you take the time to learn and get to know your team and understand not just what makes them tick at work, but what's going on in their personal lives, what's going on in their family lives, just so you can have that appreciation. So it's just like that rounded skills. And for me personally, it's like I say, whenever I maybe start to write down a CV type thing for myself, for me, or when I'm, reviewing applications, it's important you got the qualification, but I always go to that last page of what else can you bring to this role? Because I'm always fascinated by people's outside hobbies, what makes them tick, work-life balance, because I know we've not touched on that now, but that's really important. And I think for me, COVID at the moment has really brought that home to me, how it's really important to get that right. And I hadn't necessarily quite got that right before COVID, because I was doing lots of traveling and lots of things like that, and got a little boy. So no, part of this is work-life balance, getting it all right. Career is really important, but so is your well-being, your health and everything else like that. So no, for me, it's all those sort of skills and taking that time to think for yourself. You can only be good for you in a job and good for your team if you're well and healthy and you're okay in your own being as well. So part of that for me at the moment is about a bit of my own looking after oneself, I think reflects well on the team and things like that. So no, so transferable skills wise, be honest. I think honesty is so important. If you don't know how to do something, just say it. Not everybody knows everything. And somebody, one of my land managers always says at the moment, no question's a daft question. And that is so true. And I value that. And I don't know where that's come from, but even to this day, I can't remember the name of the textbook that we used, financial accounting and management accounting, when we were training. Sometimes I feel like I need to go back to that and just ask myself those questions, because you do get quite far removed from some of that. So again, to colleagues on the call, you don't need to remember everything you're learning. You don't need to remember all of those rules for cash flows and all that kind of stuff, because that's inherent in you. You will get through those exams. Part of these transferable skills is being able to find the answers, ask the question, not be afraid to admit it. Might not know everything. So yeah, that for me is probably my human side, and that might be personal to me, Dev, but that's how I've always been. And I treat people I work with the same. I don't expect them to be 100% fully fledged accountants. You know what I'm saying? That everyone's got bits that don't come as easily as other people, and people have strengths in all areas, which doesn't necessarily always mean balancing a balance sheet. It's for me, someone in my team who can talk to a clinician, can talk to a patient, and can talk to anybody, whether it be a senior grade, a junior grade. That for me is just as key as mathematics around some of this. So, which, like I say, is just as key. So now I'm waffling now, because there's so much I could talk about transferable skills. It's so hard to see, like, the people on this call, how people are receiving that, but it is important, and everybody will have something they can offer. And definitely, my voice is going again. So let me think then. If we had any tips, Dev, on careers now, if we were students again, so if we were back in the day when we were a student, and kind of any tips for our colleagues on the call, have you got anything you might say to them? What would you consider now if you were a student, if you could do it all again?
For me, the biggest advice that I'll give to students is to take your time to understand yourself. It's really important. I would suggest using the flower exercise from the what color is your parachute. So, I go by this Richard things. I know I shouldn't be, I don't have any commission, I have to say, but it's such a very, such a amazing tool. And I'll talk you through this without showing the book up, but really, it shows you what to prioritize, what is important in your life. So know what are the purposes and values and the goals in your life. So would you like to work in an organization which is community oriented, or would you like to just go and make a lot of money? Just knowing yourself. What are the knowledges or field of interest that you would like to spend most of your time on? What are your favorite transferable skills that you'd like to use in your daily work? So would it be research and analytical skill, or would it be communication, or would you like to be creative and just have graphic designs, for example? What kind of people would you like to work for? So people who give you instruction all the time and just micromanage you, or would you like to be given freedom to be creative with minimal supervision? So know yourself in that. And then after that, you also have to think about, what are your favorite working conditions? Do you prefer working indoor, outdoor? So outdoor, I mean, you might want to be extreme and say, I'm not extreme, but I suppose personable. I'd like to work in Arctic or Antarctic or forest. It's very different than working in an office space. What is the level of responsibility and the salary that you would prefer? So the reason I say this is, once you get to know yourself and what is the priorities of your life, then you can kind of shortlist ideal career for yourself. Would it be accountancy? Would it be medical? Or would it be, actually, I'm not thinking about accountancy, but something along the line, the business officers, the business managers, the consultancy would link into account. So this kind of thinking is really important. And the reason why I say this, you're more likely to enjoy and be satisfied with your career that meets all your needs and will continue to motivate you to progress your career further. But alongside that, just touching on what you said earlier, Claire, having a mentor. I mean, I've been mentored by 2 female chief execs who used to be director of finance. Their experience, their guidance, their motivation, so what they have learned from their mistakes, so that I don't make the same mistake, it's been so invaluable in shaping my finance career. They challenge me to think outside the box, trust in my ability, because sometimes you have the imposter syndrome going, well, I'm not sure if I should be doing accountancy. Oh, I don't know. I think it's quite difficult. But no, actually, building my confidence has been really good on that side of things. So the mentoring has been really good. I've also been coached by a retired chief exec who gave me a number of self-reflection tools to think about, how am I doing in my personal life? And just like what you said, personal life and work goes hand in hand. So you need to have that balance. So what is the importance to me? What are the areas which are important to me? And what are the actions that I need to take to make sure I feel satisfied and content in my life? And more recently, I've been sponsored by a chief finance officer of a trust, where she basically creates opportunities for me, like learning, shadowing, or probably if there's a career that it might look really nice, she might be pushing me in that direction. And that's really good, because I strongly believe it's really important to have a network of support, both in personal as well as professional life. So really, it's being proactive to identify who can support you in your career. Just reach out, use LinkedIn, or any kind of base. I know the CIPFA itself, they have the apprenticeship, they have the buddy, and they've got the mentor and the coach at the same time. But alongside that, think about what would you be willing to give back to the community. So obviously for me, I've benefited from the mentoring and coaching. So I now mentor and coach university students, realizing how beneficial it is for one's growth. So some of the advice I would give to students who are thinking about how to take their career. Any stuff that you want to add, Claire?
I think you answered that extremely eloquently, Dev. I think what I would say is, I wouldn't necessarily say back in when I was choosing, you feel like you're choosing a career that's for life. And it does feel quite pressured at the time, because you feel like you're making these decisions that are going to affect the rest of your life. I think that world's changed a lot now. I wouldn't say, apart from maybe I could count it on my hand, the amount of people I know that have started in a career and end their career in the same profession or the same area. I think all I'd say to students on the call is, yes, you will make some decisions at the beginning of your career, but that doesn't define you. It doesn't mean you are going to be, I'll say this, stuck in something for the rest of your life. So don't be afraid to make a decision now based on something you want to do now, because again, with CIPFA and the NHS, I think I saw something flash up just then, but I couldn't catch it on my iPad. I think someone was asking, how can you move from the public to the private sector? Well, actually, that's really quite straightforward. And actually, that's really simple. You would have an accountancy qualification under your belt that is worldwide respected. And there's nothing stopping you from moving from public to private if that so wishes to be your career path. So I don't want anyone on this call feeling like if they choose CIPFA, they are pigeoning themselves whole into a public sector career, because that's a myth. And I think that's something we just need to quash. I've chosen the public sector route purely because that's what I'm driven by. Doesn't mean I don't want to go. If I wanted to go and work in the private sector, I would, because I could. And that's the important thing people need to hear. And now, this is the route I've chosen because this is what drives me. This is what gets me up in the morning. This is what makes me tick. And I love it. And I love the public sector. Can't quite put my finger on why. But I think that's just how we all are, and everyone's different. So no, if I like say going back to being a student, I would allow myself to worry less about the decision-making process and go with it, go with your heart, go with what feels right at the time, because you've got a long career ahead of you to move direction and choose something very different. There's so many opportunities at the moment. I'll use the NHS because that's where me and Dev are, but you don't have to stay in the NHS an accountant. You could become a general manager of a service. You can move into business development type work. You can move into transformation and move into so much that isn't accountancy, but you can use those skills to make such a difference. The amount of people that I've worked with who trained through the finance route, who are chief executives of hospitals or chief executives of CCGs, clinical commissioning groups, because you can do that. So like I say, I saw that flash up, Dev. I wasn't sure if that was the question, but I just wanted to let people know that whatever you choose at the age of 18 to 25 or whatever age you are as mature students will not define you. So that's my answer there.
I just add to that, just like yourself, right? I mean, we started off introducing ourselves saying, you know, this is what my career has been in the past. So I finished my degree in 2008, so that's ages ago. And then I had an academic career for the last 10 years. So physics, I've never looked at a debit credit account sheet until about September 2017 when I first enrolled into CIPFA. So that just shows learning is for life. And you don't need to worry about moving from one area to another, because whatever you do in your life, your career, whatever you do at that point, you'd always pick up some transferable skills that would be usable in the next job. So that's just to kind of give people the confidence that it's okay to choose whatever you want that you enjoy at that point in life.
No, yeah. Totally agree. I am minded of time. We did have one last thing, didn't we? We're going to say, what do we think the biggest challenges facing the public / NHS finance professionals of the future is likely to be? So should we just try and wrap this one up and have this little bit of a conversation, and then I'm sure Alison will tell us if we've got some questions. So so biggest challenges facing the public / NHS. If I jump in there, I suppose the immediate impact is the outpouring after COVID, isn't it? And again, there's wider issues to obviously pre-COVID. Obviously before COVID, we were just getting all the waiting lists down to a very low level. If we go to tangible outputs here, our 52-week waits were so low. We're now at a situation where, I'm quoting government figures here, I'm quoting what I think I last heard on the BBC, so it won't be correct. I think they were saying something like 6 million people are waiting in the NHS. So the immediate issue the NHS is facing is, how do we get back to where we were, and how do we get all of these people treated, and how do we work through that? So that's the immediate impact, isn't it, Dev? That obviously will be involved from a finance point of view, because there's going to be lots of work around all of that. But I would say the next 5 to 10 years is going to be recovery. Getting COVID is business, we'll call it business as usual. It'll become probably like a flu program in the long run, possibly. But for me, that's the biggest challenge. And also workforce. You only have to look at the news every day where we're saying we don't have enough doctors, don't have enough nurses, don't have enough NHS staff. So that's a big factor in the NHS. And how do we, like Dev and I can't solve this today, can we, Dev? But we know that's an impact in the NHS and working through all of that. So workforce for me, and getting us back to a position where we get those numbers down, because I always think of the patient. At the end of the day, I'm here for a patient, and if we've got 6 million patients waiting for treatment or waiting to be seen, that's important. That's our thing we need to do, as well as keeping on top of the. Who knows? Got feedback, but anyway, I'm waffling again. Have you anything else you might want to add to that part?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, I'm thinking outside the box, outside of NHS, I suppose. So one of the biggest challenge I feel that we're having is too much focus on short-term goals and failure to recognize that sometimes we need to choose or make some short-term sacrifice to achieve the greater benefit in the longer term. So that could be investing in research in certain area, developing solution and applying this to preventative intervention early on in life to avoid future or more costly treatment. So, you know, the stuff that you're talking about, the elective stuff, there is so much backlogs. However, instead of actually going, oh, we're just going to get more workforce, actually, what about building hospitals or short-term kind of buildings? Push your money into capital to get the right kind of infrastructure or different kind of screening to enable those intervention to be picked up, you know, early on, so that we can make sure that patients are not put in pressure going forward. Also, we need to invest in recruitment and getting people to really think about joining this profession in the public sector. We need to invest in training them because they are the future. So, we're talking to all these apprentices or possible students who might get into CIPFA. What does that mean for them? I think there's something about listening to their ideas and kind of incorporating that to public sectors. And finally, I really think we need to modernize and invest more in technology and innovation to get work done more effectively, efficiently, and more sustainably in the long term. I think I will wrap up there. And the reason why I say that is, sorry if it's noisy. The reason I say that is because technology is going to take us in a long way. So it's really important to focus on that now, but I'll stop there.
That's fine. Thank you, Dev. Bless her. Bless Dev. You're having some building work done, aren't you, Dev? So Alison, is there anything you want to jump in and ask, or is any questions? I can't see the Q&A box.
Okay, well, I can see the Q&A box, and I can tell you we do have some questions, so I will just read them out. First question is, what would you advise somebody about moving from local government to NHS at a slightly higher level than entry? I'm currently mid to senior management level in finance and interested in transitioning or moving across without having to step down a level or two.
I can answer that if that helps. When I was in local government, I can't remember the banding scheme on the local government, but I was on a certain level. I was finance manager in local government, but I saw a job, assistant head of finance in the NHS, and I think it was 2 grades higher. And you know what? I went for it, Alison, or sorry, colleague who asked that question. And I went for it because I read the personal spec and I thought, tick, I can do that, tick, I can do that. There's certain bits in there I thought might be pushing me a little bit, but actually in my application form I was honest. I said to them, there's certain elements of this role I can do, there's certain elements I'd probably need a little bit of on-the-job training, and I went for it. And I don't know if it was luck, but I got the job. So I would say to anybody who's thinking of moving from local government to health or vice versa, if it's a job you're interested in, it's a job that sparked that passion, or that it's a job that's made you think, oh, that there's no reason why you can't apply for it. I'm also a firm believer of ringing up the recruitment manager and actually asking some questions and saying, this has interested me. I'll take that example. I'm at this grade, I'm currently doing this. I can see you're asking for this. And just asking the suitability type criteria. I think sometimes if you don't ask, you don't get. And I think that's part of my personality, Alison. I'm probably a little bit, I just asked those questions, and I did that with the NHS and I got back in. And like I say, being wholly honest, I think it was 2 grades higher than when I left local government. So it can be done. It can be done.
Thank you, Claire. I don't know, Deb, if you want to add something to that?
No, I think Claire hit the nail on the coffin, to be honest. It was really, really what I would do. I'll speak to the recruiter. If you can do 50% of the job spec, go for it. There's always something about the imposter syndrome, but doesn't matter. Get on the call, speak to the person who's hiring or the recruiter, and just put yourself out there. What can be the worst? You might not get the job, but you get the experience. Yeah, so exactly. I'd say go for it.
Yeah, that's really sound advice from both of you. You've got to put yourself out there, haven't you? We've got another question here. Somebody who is currently on the grad scheme but isn't getting any of the opportunities to implement actual change. They're currently doing finance, accounting and reporting, and wonder if you have any suggestions on how to become more involved in projects, service line development that will involve more discussions with the directorates and multidisciplinary teams.
Dev, do you want to jump in first there, because you're a bit closer to the grad scheme? I'll jump in if needs be.
Just struggling with noise at the moment. I'll try my best. So I would personally say make contact with your placement manager and try to push it, saying, or if you're in the grad scheme, there's a system called Genie, isn't it, where you have all your competency, and try to direct it in such a way that the work that you're going to want to get involved is very beneficial for the competencies. And if you can't get that, I would say proactively look for opportunities outside the area of your trust, or maybe other kind of teams, to create the opportunity for yourself and go and speak to your placement manager that way. That is what I have done. But Claire, any ideas as well?
No, think that's, again, I go back to me being vocal in some respects, that I would just take the bull by the horns on this one, and I would either go to my person who's in the trust, who's your local contact, and just say, look, this is what I want access to, this is what I would like. And it might be not an immediate thing, but they might say, well, actually, this is coming up, we'll put your name on it. And I think you just need to put yourself out there, ask those questions, and like you say, do a little bit of research and just see what you could do, and just put a case to them. At the end of the day, on the grad scheme, you do have those core competencies that you have to be able to tick off. So that is the hook there, isn't it, Dev, to say, well, actually, I do need this exposure, I do need to have this. So actually, I think I could do that by doing this task. So yeah, I would just ask the question and keep pursuing. And if go back up to your grad manager, is that right, Dev? Is there a graduate manager?
Yeah, so I suppose the placement manager is the main person. If you're not getting that, then I would take it to the program manager. And if that's not working as well, take it to the leadership academy itself, or I mean, your regional leadership academy, to kind of talk about, this is my challenges, what can you do for me? Normally they're quite good in resolving those issues. So I would try those. But, you know, if you, by all means, if you think you want to approach Claire or myself outside this call, we can talk you through some of our kind of thought process as well.
Oh,
Yep.
That's really generous offer. Thank you both. And another question, which I think this is one you might have seen flash up, Claire, and you sort of picked up some of it, but the actual question is, how can we move from the public sector to the private sector? Can it be done at any point of our career, or vice versa, moving from the private to the public?
I think the simple answer to that is yes. I don't think there's anything stopping anybody working public or private. Like I say, I will get myself, you might know more on this, Alison, than I will do, but obviously every accountancy qualification does slightly different nuances of modules and stuff, but every accountancy qualification gives the core training to be that accountant. So I don't see what the issue is. It might be that if you move from private to public or vice versa, or public to private, you might want to upskill yourself in certain areas in that role. I suppose I'm struggling a little bit on this one because I've never seen it as an issue, being able to move between the sectors. I don't know if you have, Dev.
Not particularly, because obviously on the grad scheme, I had the opportunity to work with consultancy, and it's been quite beneficial. And equally, I was given the offer if I wanted to just work for the private sector. So I can't see a problem. I mean, the big four, I'm talking about, you know, you have PwC, Deloitte, McKinsey, and so on, KPMG, EY. So I don't think that's a problem. However, if you're thinking outside of that, perhaps if you want to give us an example, Prabin, we can kind of unpick that.
Yeah.
I wonder if some of this is to do with that, as you talked about very early on, Claire, the perception of CIPFA as pigeonholing you in the public sector. And I think that is not the case. And I think that message has come through very clearly from you both. So I hope that's the message that's coming across to everybody on this call, that CIPFA brings you a whole load of opportunities in the public sector and beyond. And for me, what's come out really strongly from this discussion is the complete passion that you both have for working in the NHS and the public sector. And, you know, some of the key things that I wrote down, the human side, empathy, understanding, compassion, the importance of actually seeing the impact of the financial decisions as well, so, you know, walking the floor, the cook's tour, whatever. And I think that's something that what resonated a huge amount with me, and I'm sure it will have resonated with everyone else. So I'd like to thank you both for a hugely interesting discussion. It's made me want to go and, you know, get a job in the NHS, quite frankly, and great insights into your careers, and particularly the offer of, you know, happy for people to contact you. I think that's really important as well. And speaking for us, you know, CIPFA as an institute, we absolutely want to support our members, our students, and anybody working in the public finance profession to be the best they can be at their job. You know, it's about excellence in public financial management, because, you know, what we know is if you manage your public finances properly, you can achieve more, and there's more benefit to the end users from that. And also, I was really glad that I think Dev, you spoke about ethics as acting with integrity as well, hugely important. And we want to make sure that, you know, those of us working in the public sector develop the right skills across the whole of finance function. So we will be contacting people after this event with some suggestions of further reading or CPD that you might want to consider. But for now, I'd like to say thank you so much to both Claire and Dev, because it's not just about coming here and doing this. It's also about the preparation they put in beforehand and think about what you would like to hear about. And we've got a couple of minutes left. If there's any final questions anybody might want to put to our panelists. Maybe talk about CPD. Is there anything you can say about, how you access CPD and how helpful that is?
I guess it's inherent, Alison. I attend as many courses as I can, usually free ones if I'm being honest, but a lot of it for me is reading and on-the-job training, and just regularly on websites, just keeping myself appraised of all the kind of things we do. Like I say, with CIPFA now, I suppose I've been doing it for so long, I hone in on certain courses that I find relevant to my good self at the moment. But I think at the moment there's things like annual accounts. I think IFRS 16 is a big one at the moment. There's all these different things coming up that I think you just do by doing. So now I just get on as many courses as I can and do my CPD that way. So I don't know about Dev, if Dev's got an answer.
Yeah, so I would just add on. So what Claire said is lots of finance stuff. We have HMFA, we have HSJ. Of course, within CIPFA itself, there's a different kind of conferences and so on we can go on to. But equally, there's the softer skill side of things. So equality and diversity has been quite a big agenda. So there's CPD points on that as well, and getting involved in those kind of webinars and network, because in the East of England region, we run a couple of EDI-based networks, so cultural diversity matters, women in leadership for finance, as well as LGBTQ plus network, where we really focus on why it's important to have a kind of inclusive treatment to everyone, and everyone should get the benefit. So those softer skills also gets you CPD points. Just kind of thought I would highlight that part as well. But yeah, just keep learning. Go for whatever opportunity you have. That's what I do.
Definitely.
Great advice. Sorry, Claire.
No, definitely. Keep learning. That's a good line to finish with.
Yeah, great advice. And absolutely look at what's happening in your CIPFA region. Lots of events, as Claire was mentioning, lots of low cost and no cost. So, do take advantage of that. We've got a question here. Will CIPFA arrange short courses regarding data analytics, as it is a must for the accountants? I think that's something that CIPFA will need to take away. Claire and Dev can't possibly answer that, but that's a really good and useful point. So thank you for raising that, Praveen. That's really helpful. I'm conscious of the time. And that everyone here has probably got lots of things to get on with. And so just again, thank you, Dev and Claire, for attending and hugely interesting and insightful discussion. And thank you to everybody present for attending. And the recording will be put up on the CIPFA YouTube channel. And so do make sure that you access it there and recommend it to colleagues and friends as well. So thank you very much, everybody, and goodbye. I'm going to end the session now. Thank you.